They call him Seatin, the man of legends.
Hello and welcome to the Harbcon Guide. I'm your star-spangled host, Seatin, the self-proclaimed man of legends, and I'll stop doing the stupid voice now. Hello and welcome, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the Harbcon spec, which is Harbinger, Archon, and Chloromancer. Now, the points in the spec are very kind of like fiddly. You can swap around stuff to get other stuff, so you can sacrifice a bit of damage, for example in Archon, to get like an AoE cleanse. You can slightly complicate the rotation up by taking points in Harbinger out of combat mastery and putting them into Blazing Light and also Light Nova. So there is a lot to fiddle about with these specs, and yeah, so I'm going to leave that up to you, but this is the basic spec I'm advocating to play for beginners to the Harbcon guide at the moment, which is 40 Archon, with the point allocation that I've got here, 32 Harbinger, and 4 Chloromancer. A link to this spec will be in the description of this video, so check that out if you want the exact point allocation, but I'm not going to spend 5 minutes talking about every talent point and bore you to death with that, because you, audience, deserve better. So we're going to explain sort of the basics about the spec now. So let's talk about firstly the macros that I'm using. Now, I have two macros for this spec. I have a slashing macro and I have a spell macro. In my slashing macro is essentially Storm's Fury and a Storm Slash, with also Withering Vine and Searing Vitality for when I'm out of range of the target. And in my spell macro, right at the top is Vorpal Slash, Volcanic Bomb, Earthen, Barrage, Spark Shower, and finally Vile Spores. Now, my spell macro is only to be used when I have a proc from the ability known as Eldritch Armor, which is a self buff that you should always have on yourself, as well as Lightning Blade for single target. Now, just sort of getting ready, Archon really is about, you got to do a bit of preparation before you pull a mob and sort of really get into the heat of combat. So one of the first things that I recommend you do before sort of engaging a mob or maybe a boss, so if you're in a raid, you want to duel another player and get 5 stacks of a buff called Pillaging Stone. This will give you 14 extra intelligence and wisdom per stack. So, oh, my math has totally escaped me, but it's around sort of a total of 80 extra intelligence and wisdom, which, to be honest, you can't argue with. The more stats, the better your character becomes at dealing damage and bringing the pain. So that's always a good trait to have. So going on to the single target rotation, it is ridiculously straightforward. Essentially, all you have to do is ensure, firstly, that all your Archon auras are kept up. That's kind of a #1 priority. The 3 Archon auras are Arcane Aegis, Shared Vigor, and Vitality of Stone. So you want to make sure all of those are kept up at the time, because not only do they buff your party and main raid members, but due to the talent points that you have in Archon, they also buff you. Wow, amazing. How wonderful is that? More damage, God, the fun never ends. So that is kind of like your #1 priority, but you only have to refresh those like every 5 minutes. So that kind of goes to the back of your mind. Now, as an Archon, any sort of Archon variant, you're usually in charge of putting the 2 resistance and physical debuffs up on a target. So you pretty much better get used to that. So whenever you're about to engage a target or boss, make sure as soon as they pull, you chuck up Crumbling Resistance and Ashen Defense. Not only do those increase the damage that the target takes by a fair bit, but it also increases your resistance to physical and magical attacks, giving you more survivability and less chance of dying. And as everybody well, not everybody knows, but I've done some very in-depth calculations, and I found out that your character is at least 100% more effective while alive in comparison to being dead. So tip of the day there, guys, you know, you can take that tip and do what you will with it, but that is a general tip. You're much more better off while being alive. So one of the things I like to do before when I engage, is quickly chuck up Searing Vitality, and then I will toggle on Charge Blade and throw down a Piercing Beam. Now the rotation apart from that is pretty bloody straightforward. Essentially, all you have to do is spam your slashing macro, which I have set to number 2, and then hit the spell macro whenever you see an Eldritch Gift proc or armor proc. Now, whenever you have Vorpal Slash off cooldown, you're going to need to tap the spell macro 2 times. This is because Vorpal Slash doesn't consume Eldritch Armor, but it does benefit from the reduced global cooldown talent that you have for it. So essentially, that's why you want to have it in your spell macro as opposed to your standard slashing macro. Now, that is pretty much it for the rotation, but I feel like I'm obligated to cover a bit more about sort of the cooldowns that you have. Now, on number 4 on my bar, I have this lovely cooldown called Lava Field, which should pretty much be used off cooldown in like 99% of scenarios, and you can use Eldritch Armor to cast it instantly. So this puts down a field of lava, which doesn't really look like lava and more looks like sort of green mossy fog, but that field does damage to the enemy and also increases your damage and anyone standing in that field of lava as damage by 15% for the duration of the lava field. So that is bloody awesome. Now, the second lovely cooldown that you have is a cooldown called Flaring Power, which is basically Rift's answer to Heroism. Now, to initially cast Flaring Power, you need 50 charge. So when you do that, basically, your party and raid members get their attack and spell power increased by 15% for 30 seconds. But bear in mind, this does add a 5-minute cooldown to everyone, allowing them not to benefit from Flaring Power for another 5 minutes. So yeah, just keep that at the back of your mind, guys, that it's kind of like you can only use it once every 5 minutes and no sooner. So I think that's kind of it for the single target rotation. It is as simple as that, really. Keep up Piercing Beam, spam your slashing macro, and hit your spell macro whenever you get a proc. If your Vorpal Slash is off cooldown, then hit your spell macro twice before you go back to your slashing macro, and keep the Archon auras up. Fairly straightforward. It might take, 10 to 15 minutes to get to grips with, but I will be sure to leave all that information in the description of this video, if the video itself was not clear enough for you. Now, going on to the AoE rotation. Now, for the AoE rotation, you want to switch your blade to Luminous Weapon, which is the AoE Harbinger blade. You might want to put it somewhere a bit convenient for you to, actually hit it, but the AoE rotation is pretty bloody straightforward. Now, you want to keep up your Archon auras as well. Pretty much whatever you're doing, just keep up your Archon auras. You're going to have to refresh them a lot. It may seem a bit tedious and boring, but, just better safe than sorry. So I'm just going to reset the parser here, and the AoE rotation is essentially spam Lucent Slash infinite times. And whenever Lava Field is off cooldown, hit Lava Field. As you can see, for very, very little effort, I'm doing 50-something K AoE DPS, which is pretty awesome and pretty damn easy and straightforward for essentially pressing one button. So that is pretty much it for the Harbcon guide, guys. One other thing I might add is that this spec is really good in fights that you can be in melee like all of the time, but sucks for any fights that you have to range a lot or move around a lot in. It's awesome for melee fights where you can stay still and hit stuff, but range fights you're much better off using Pyro Archon for. And this spec does perform better than Pyro Archon and does do more DPS than Pyro Archon, so be sure to bear that in mind when you're deciding which spec to use for which fight. And I apologise for the burp then. I've been drinking far too many fizzy drinks today. Now, one more thing I'll just talk about quickly. I keep on doing this. One more thing. It never ends. Is basically the Harbcon has 2 purges. You have one AoE purge, which is Cleansing Flames. Now, basically, the cast time of this can be reduced to 0 by just hitting something with a slashing attack and then using it. Also, you have a single target cleanse called Purification, which you can use in dire circumstances where maybe somebody needs cleansing. So, yeah, that's something that's pretty cool to bear in mind. if you have any questions about the spec, or how it's played or anything, or maybe I didn't cover anything too well, or maybe I got something wrong, then leave it in the description of this video. I'll be sure to clear anything up. Any help you need, guys, I am here for you. Let me know. I'll do my best to answer. Thank you once again for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, tell a friend, Twitter, spam in level 60 chat, all that kind of fun stuff. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys, and stay completely awesome.